video, we're going to be talking about complex inheritance, specifically how a person's sex, or in other words, their gender, affects inheritance and certain inheritance patterns related to sex. So before we go any further, just a quick review. Remember that humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each pair is a homologous pair that typically codes for the same traits. That's true of 22 of the pairs. The 23rd pair is a little different. They're the sex chromosomes. So the sex chromosomes are what we call X and Y, and they determine a person's gender as well as a number of their traits. The other 22 that I mentioned, they're referred to as autosomal chromosomes. So those autosomal chromosomes all are exactly the same for both male and female. The sex chromosomes, however, are a little different. Like all chromosomes, they work the same way in meiosis. So they pair up in meiosis 1, they split in meiosis 2, and eventually when sperm or egg is used in fertilization, you get one or the other from each parent. However, females only have X chromosomes. So when their chromosomes split up in meiosis, all eggs have X's, because just like any trait in which you have homozygous characteristics, you only have one option. And for the case of females, it's X or X. Males, however, they only have one X. Instead, they have an X and a Y. And so X and Y split up in meiosis. Half of the sperm get X's, the other half of the sperm gets Y, and so half will make males, half will make females. And just like all other chromosomes, they split up, they come together, they behave exactly the same way in every other respect, other than one's a Y. So, quick story. My cousin has 3 girls, and for years and years, he used to blame his wife and say, Lisa hasn't given me a boy yet. In actuality, it's his fault. He's the guy. He's got an X and a Y. Half of his sperm had X's, the other half had Y, and it just happened that his X's were the ones that ended up fertilizing the eggs and making his daughters. So, gentlemen, don't blame the ladies. So, this is a typical Punnett square. Notice we don't have any traits. The X's and the Y's refer only to chromosomes. So, if you fill this in your notes, we've got X and X. That would be over here for the ladies. The dads have an X and a Y. And so, which they get from their dad determines whether they're going to have a son or a daughter. Now, X and Y chromosomes aren't just different because they have different names, but if you look at the picture here, this is an actual picture taken with an electron scanning microscope. It scans the surface really, really well. And you notice that the Y is much, much, much smaller. So consequently, the Y contains less information. So there are many genes in which the X has a full set of information, and there's no corresponding information on the Y. Now, it doesn't quite work like this, where the genes at the bottom of the chromosome are the ones that are the same. But if you notice, this is all information that's all on the X and not on the Y. And that could represent many, many, many genes. So any of the genes that are in this section of the Y, this section that's grayed out right here, those are genes for which males will only have one allele. They won't get a corresponding allele from their dad. These are traits that we call sex-linked traits. A sex-linked trait is found only on one sex, not on the other. One sex chromosome, and not on the other. Most of them, because of the nature of the X, are on the X and not the Y. And so for those traits, males get one copy of the gene from their mom, and that's it. Nothing from dad, because dad's information, his Y doesn't have any of that information. Females then get 2. So you might have heard certain things come from mom's side. That's because they're on the X chromosome. So males, therefore, express whatever it is they inherit from their mom. So there's a bunch of examples, and some that people often think are sex-linked but aren't. Hemophilia is one. Hemophilia is a bleeding disorder. It's a blood clotting issue that the European royal families had, and because a lot of the European royals married each other, it was but much more common in the royals than the rest of the population, and we experienced it once again in the males mostly. Color blindness is another. Men are much more likely to be colorblind because, once again, they're only going to need one allele from their mom. So if you think you might be colorblind, colorblindness means that you have difficulty distinguishing different colors. Not that you can't see any, but that you have trouble differentiating them, specifically reds and greens. So if you're colorblind, these numbers will be pretty tough for you to make up. Don't freak out if you can't see them all, because the resolution of your screen might affect some of that. So in the top left corner here, this should be a 5. This one would be 45. There's There's a 4. Here's the 5. This one most people can see is 12. This one would be a 2. So if you have trouble seeing that, there's a good chance you might be colorblind. So colorblindness is recessive. So for a girl to be colorblind, they need to get an allele from both mom and dad that codes for colorblindness. Guys, they only need to have one allele, so they're going to get that from mom if mom's got it. So here's an example cross. We have a heterozygous woman marries a man that's colorblind. What's the possible genotype? So if we put the dad up top, dad is colorblind. He's only going to have one allele. This X has got the recessive little b for colorblind. From mom, he has nothing from his father, so that Y is just a Y with no additional information. On the left-hand side, we have mom. Mom is heterozygous, so she's going to be normal vision. She's going to be able to see colors because she's got that dominant normal allele. But she's also a carrier for it. In other words, she has it but doesn't express it. She's heterozygous, so she has an allele that she could potentially pass on to her children. When we look at her kids, this first box is going to be a daughter. It's going to be an X from mom and X from dad. So consequently, this is a daughter who's also a carrier because she's got one big allele, one little allele, but she is going to be able to see normally. This box represents a son. This son is going to get a normal vision allele from mom, nothing from dad. So this son's going to be normal vision. He's not considered a carrier. He's just a person that can see normally. This is going to represent a daughter. And so consequently, this daughter will be colorblind. She's going to get a colorblind allele from mom, a colorblind allele from dad, and will result in colorblindness. And this is going to represent a boy that is colorblind. He's going to get mom's colorblind allele and nothing from dad. So if we look at the probabilities, there's a 25% chance of having a daughter who's normal vision, 25% chance of having a daughter who's colorblind, 25% chance of having a son who's normal, and 25% chance of having a son who's colorblind. Another way you can look at it is 50% of the kids would be colorblind, 50% of the kids would not be. So another example is calico cats. Calicos and torties are cats that have this orange and black pattern. So the calico comes from coat color that is both sex-linked and dominant. So in cats, orange, O alleles would represent orange. B alleles would represent some other color, could be gray or black, that would be another gene. And so consequently, if they inherit an O and a B, they're going to be calico. Normally, remember, we'd write the O and the B as a superscript of another letter, but we would this way to make it simple. So the gene is carried on the X, and so male cats can never be heterozygous because they can only have one X. And so consequently, females are the only ones that can ever be calico because they're the only ones that can ever have both an orange allele and a black allele. So if we look here, we've got a dad. He's a pretty cute orange tabby. And we've got a mom. She's a gray calico. When we look at the possibilities for their genotypes, dad has to have an orange allele on his X and nothing on his Y. The mom cat is calico, so she's got an orange allele and a blue allele. When we look at their offspring, this combination results in an orange from dad, an orange from mom, and result in an orange female kitten. This combination is going to get an orange from mom, nothing from dad, and so it's going to result in an orange male kitten. This combination is going to get a black from mom, from over here, nothing from dad, or other color, and it's going to result in this case of a black cat, a kitten. And finally, they could potentially have a calico daughter. They'd get an orange from dad, a black from mom, and the kitten would be calico. So a lot of times sex-linked traits are mistaken for the only way that sex can affect genetic expression. However, as you probably know, I hopefully know, that there's a lot of ways males and females are different from each other. And many of those ways are what we would call sex-limited traits. In other words, their expression is based on whether you're a male or female. That's usually because they're only expressed in the presence of certain hormones. For example, testosterone is in much higher quantities in males, so that's going to be expressed when there's a large quantity of of testosterone. So there's many examples. Milk production in cows, for example. Males don't produce milk, and so consequently a gene that controls how much milk is produced would never be expressed in a male. Antlers in deer, does have a gene for antlers, but they don't express it because female deer don't have antlers. So we can think of lots of examples: breast size, facial hair, all of those things that are associated with one of the sexes. Many of them are considered sex limited. These, it's very, very important to remember, are traits that are not sex linked. So they're not on the X and the Y. They're on one of the autosomal, one of the other 22 pairs. Because they're not sex linked, we don't use X and Y. So if we were going to do for homework, for example, if you were going to figure out the probability of getting one of these traits, you'd figure out the probability of a parent passing these on to their kids, just like you would any other Punnett square. Then you'd have to multiply that by the probability of being male or female, 50%. Another sex-related trait that is not on the X and Y is considered sex influenced. And this one, the expression of the trait varies between males and females. So baldness is one of those. A lot of people think it's sex linked on the X and Y. It's not, nor does it come from your mother, another common misconception. Baldness is sex influenced, meaning the expression is different in males and females. Specifically, for females, it's recessive, so females have to get 2 alleles in order to be bald. It's dominant in men, and so consequently men only need to get 1 allele. It can come from either parent. It is a little bit sex limited as well, in that baldness typically expresses itself a little bit differently in males and females. So there's a lot of other examples. Horns in some sheep. All of these things are on the autosomal chromosome, so not sex linked. And so once again, we will not be using X and Y. So just like before, you calculate the probability individually, and then you're going to calculate the probability for males and females. In your problem, we'll do this one in class. Most of you will have trouble with it. But to do a problem that's sex influenced, you need to look at the probability of being homozygous or heterozygous differently for males and females. Because if it's recessive in females, they need to have 2 baldness alleles. And so you'll interpret it very differently. We'll do a practice problem in class. That's it for complex inheritance related to sex. Tune into the next video for other complex inheritance patterns.